The evening city lights flickered like tiny stars, but for Ethan the world outside his apartment balcony felt empty. He had lived alone for many years in this tall building, a place where neighbors rarely spoke and the hum of traffic drowned out any chance of real connection. Still, he liked the quiet. It gave him time to think, to watch, and to notice things most people ignored. It started one night, when he spotted a small, strange cat perched on the edge of his balcony. Its fur was dark, almost black, but it shimmered faintly under the glow of the streetlights. Ethan frowned, puzzled, because no one in the building had a pet that he knew of. The cat didn't hiss, didn't meow, and didn't move much. It simply stared at him with eyes that seemed too old and too knowing for such a tiny creature. "Hey there," Ethan said softly, stepping closer. The cat did not flinch. It just blinked slowly as if it had been expecting him. Something about the way it looked made Ethan's heart tug. He opened the door and grabbed a small bowl of food from his kitchen. "I guess you must be hungry," he murmured, placing it carefully on the balcony floor. The cat sniffed at the food but did not eat immediately. Instead, it tilted its head and watched him. Ethan shrugged and returned to his apartment. He didn't expect the cat to stay. He had lived in this city long enough to know that stray animals came and went. But when he looked out the window the next night, the cat was there again, sitting in the exact same spot, staring at him. Over the next few weeks, Ethan made it a habit to leave food and water on the balcony every evening. He didn't know why he did it, really. It wasn't like he had anyone else to take care of, or maybe that was exactly why. The presence of the small visitor gave him a strange comfort. Even when work was stressful and life felt heavy, he knew he could come home and see those quiet eyes waiting for him. The cat never made a sound. It never asked for attention. It simply existed, and Ethan respected that. Sometimes he would sit on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker below. The cat would sit silently beside the food bowl, occasionally moving its tail, and that alone was enough to make him feel less lonely. What Ethan didn't know was that the small visitor was not an ordinary cat. Far away beyond the known stars, a dragon queen paced in her golden chamber. Her massive wings rustled as she moved, and her eyes burned with worry. One of her hatchlings had disappeared months ago during a scouting mission near a distant human-inhabited planet. No amount of searching had revealed its location. Until now. The hatchling, tiny and vulnerable, had taken the form of a harmless creature to hide among humans. It had wandered through the city, avoiding detection until it found Ethan. Somehow, it had sensed that he would not hurt it. That he would feed it without demanding anything in return. Back on the balcony, the cat stretched lazily, revealing tiny claws that seemed sharper than normal. Ethan noticed them briefly but did not think much of it. He simply smiled and said, "You're lucky I like cats." The cat's eyes seemed to flicker for a moment, almost as if it understood him. Nights passed and the routine became sacred. Ethan would return from work, tired and worn, and the little creature would be there waiting. It was a small joy in his otherwise quiet life, a reminder that even in a city full of millions, something small and fragile could notice him. One evening, as the sky turned deep blue and the city lights began to blink on, Ethan heard a soft rustle on the balcony. He looked up, expecting the cat, but it wasn't the cat that moved, it was the faint shimmer of something in the air, almost like a ripple of heat. He frowned, confused, and the cat remained still, its gaze fixed on something he could not see. For a moment Ethan felt a chill. It was strange, a feeling he could not place, as if the air itself was aware. He shook his head and laughed quietly. "You're imagining things," he muttered. The cat blinked slowly, its eyes catching the light in a way that made them glow faintly. Ethan shivered, though he did not know why, and stepped back into his apartment. That night as he slept, the hatchling remained on the balcony, curled up near the food bowl. Its small form shimmered faintly under the city lights. It could not make a sound, could not reveal itself fully, but it felt safe. And more importantly, it had found someone who cared, even unknowingly, about its survival. Ethan, meanwhile, dreamt of stars he had never seen, of creatures larger than buildings, and of eyes that glimmered with intelligence and emotion far beyond his understanding. When he woke, the cat was still there, as if nothing had changed. He poured milk into a small dish and watched it drink. It was routine. It was quiet. It was perfect in its simplicity. Outside, the city hummed on, indifferent to the small life on the balcony. But somewhere far away, a mother waited. She waited and watched, unable to intervene, yet feeling the faintest hope that her child was alive and safe. The simple act of a human feeding a cat had reached across the stars, touching something ancient and powerful, though Ethan would never know it. And so, night after night, the small visitor returned, and the human continued his quiet ritual. Neither spoke, neither fully understood the other, yet a bond began to grow, a bond that would one day change the way entire worlds saw humans. For now, it was enough that someone cared even in silence, and that the smallest gesture of kindness could ripple far beyond the balcony, far beyond the city, and far beyond the stars. The little creature curled up on the balcony, its tiny body trembling in the cool night air. It was no ordinary cat, though to anyone looking from the street below, it appeared perfectly normal. Inside it was a dragon hatchling, the last of its clutch, far from home and too weak to survive in the wild. The city was a dangerous place for something like it, but somehow it had survived. Somehow it had found Ethan. The hatchling remembered the attack that had separated it from its siblings. One moment, it had been learning to fly under its mother's watchful eyes, and the next, it was caught in a storm of fire and confusion. The enemy had been relentless, a species that feared dragons and sought to destroy them. In its panic, it had fled through the stars, hiding in forms that would make it invisible to hunters. When it arrived on this small blue planet, it took the shape of a cat, hoping to remain unnoticed. At first, it had been hungry and scared, uncertain whether the human who lived in the tall building would harm it or feed it. But something about Ethan was different. There was no fear in him, no curiosity that felt like a trap. He simply left food, and that simple kindness gave the hatchling courage. For the first time since the ambush, it felt safe. Each night, the hatchling watched him from the corner of its little eyes. Ethan would talk to it softly, sometimes telling stories about his day or the people in the building. The hatchling could not understand the words fully, but it sensed the emotion behind them. Humans were strange creatures, small and fragile, yet capable of acts of care that rivaled the oldest dragons. This human, with no reward or reason, fed it out of pure habit and perhaps loneliness. That was something the hatchling had not expected. Being in this form had its advantages. It could explore the building without fear, hiding in corners where Ethan would not notice. At night, it would leap lightly from balcony to balcony, practicing tiny jumps to build strength, though the wounds from the ambush still burned like old fire in its wings. It longed to grow, to fly again, but it was too weak, too far from its mother, and too far from the world it had known. The Dragon Queen searched for her hatchling constantly. From her golden throne in a distant star system, she sent scouts to every planet where dragons might appear. She used her magic to sense even the smallest movement across the galaxy. Yet, for all her power, she could not see her child hidden among humans. It was as if the little human world had swallowed it whole, protecting it from even the sharpest dragon senses. Sometimes, the hatchling would imagine returning home, soaring above mountains and rivers, feeling the wind under its wings. But the memory was bittersweet. It remembered the fire, the ambush, the sound of its siblings crying. It had been alone for so long that even the thought of returning felt impossible. It feared rejection, feared that its mother might have moved on, believing it lost forever. Still, the human on the balcony gave it hope. Every day the hatchling felt its strength grow, though slowly. Each piece of food, each drop of water, each quiet night spent watching the stars, reminded it that survival was possible. Ethan had no idea he was giving life to a dragon, yet his simple actions mattered more than the hatchling could explain. One night the hatchling tested its new strength. It leaped to the railing, spreading tiny wings beneath its disguised body. They were weak, trembling with the effort, but the sensation of movement, of balance in the night air, brought joy. Ethan watched, confused but unafraid. "You're a strange cat," he whispered, smiling. The hatchling blinked slowly, sensing that the human's calm acceptance was a rare gift in a world full of fear and danger. It was not only fear that had made it hide, it was survival. The galaxy was not kind to dragons, and the small hatchling knew that humans were unpredictable. Yet, in Ethan, it had found something rare, a creature who could care without power, without expectation, without threat. This was a bond unlike any it had known. Dragons often relied on strength, on magic, on fear to survive. Here it relied on something simpler: trust. The hatchling began to explore further at night, slipping through the apartment building, hiding in corners, learning the rhythms of the human world. It discovered the smells of cooked food, the warmth of blankets, the gentle hum of the city at night. These small discoveries were astonishing to a creature used to the cold silence of space and the roar of wings. And always, when it returned to the balcony, Ethan was waiting. It began to understand something fundamental about humans. They were fragile, yes, but their minds and hearts were flexible in ways dragons were not. Where dragons relied on fire and strength, humans relied on patience, on kindness, and on quiet routines. And these traits, so simple and so unassuming, were capable of saving a life. One night, the hatchling heard a soft sound from the streets below. It was a dog barking, a human shouting, a car rushing past. For the first time since the ambush, it felt the chaos of the human world, and yet it also felt safe. The balcony, the human, the quiet ritual of food and care, had created a sanctuary. For the first time in months, it believed survival was possible. It dreamed of the Dragon Queen sometimes, of golden scales and enormous wings, of the warmth of home. Yet it also dreamed of the human, and these dreams were different. They were not filled with fear or longing, but with hope. There was a strange magic in watching someone care without expectation. The hatchling had known loss, betrayal, and fear, but here, it felt something new: connection. As the night deepened, the hatchling curled up near the bowl, its small body glowing faintly under the city lights. It had learned to trust, to wait, to observe, and to grow quietly. It had found a home in the unlikeliest place, on a human balcony, with a human who did not even know he was feeding a dragon. Somewhere far away, the Dragon Queen sensed a faint warmth, a flicker of life she could not trace. She did not yet know that her last hatchling had found a human protector, but somehow she felt hope. The galaxy was wide, the stars were many, and yet, in the quiet of one human's care, a dragon hatchling could survive. And that small survival, unnoticed by the world, was the first step toward changing everything. The hatchling closed its eyes and slept lightly, listening to the city hum below. Tomorrow it would explore a little further, test its wings a little more, and return to the balcony. And Ethan would be there as always, offering food, offering warmth, offering something that no magic or power could ever replace: care. The bond was growing, quiet and invisible, like a seed under snow. And one day the hatchling would learn that simple bonds could reach farther than dragons, farther than humans, and even farther than the stars themselves. Night fell over the city, and the lights of the tall buildings flickered like tiny constellations mirrored on Earth. Ethan closed his apartment door after a long day and walked to the balcony, carrying a small bowl of food. He was tired, but the sight of the little cat, waiting for him, made his steps lighter. The creature, curled neatly near the railing, lifted its head and blinked slowly, its eyes reflecting the city lights in a way that seemed almost knowing. The hatchling had grown stronger since arriving on this human world. Its body was still small, still disguised, but its senses had sharpened. It could feel the vibrations in the air, the faint movements of life in the streets, and the subtle hum of the human city. But tonight there was something different. Something distant, something massive watching. Far above the city, in orbit and beyond, alien eyes observed silently. Alien ships, sleek and dark, hovered just outside the atmosphere. They had been tracking anomalies in the city's energy patterns, unaware of the small life hiding among humans. The hatchling sensed them immediately. Its body stiffened, and a quiet flicker ran across its scales, though hidden from human sight. It did not panic, it never panicked, but it became alert. The hatchling knew that dragons were being hunted across the galaxy. And yet, here on this fragile, small planet, it was safe. Partly because of the human who fed it, partly because no one knew it existed. And now, partly because the observers were curious. Something about this human's actions had drawn attention, even from faraway stars. Ethan poured the food into the bowl and sat nearby, sipping his tea. He noticed the little cat watching the sky, its head tilted, ears twitching. "You're staring at the sky again?" he said softly, almost to himself. He did not know why, but he felt a strange connection to whatever the creature was sensing. It was as if the world beyond his balcony suddenly mattered more than it had before. Above them, the alien observers communicated in signals and pulses. They were unsure what to make of the human species. On most planets, creatures that offered kindness to something vulnerable were rare, often weak. But here, this human did not just tolerate the presence of the small creature, he nurtured it. He fed it without fear, without expectation, without understanding that it was more than it appeared. That simple act rippled outward in ways the aliens could not yet measure. Meanwhile, the Dragon Queen, in her golden chamber far away, sensed a faint pulse of life. She paused mid-step as the energy touched her mind, a heartbeat, steady, persistent, and human. It was not her hatchling itself, but a protective aura, something surrounding it. Her instincts roared with recognition. Her child was alive, safe for now, and something in the human world was keeping it that way. She had never expected humans to offer such protection, to hold life so carefully without reward. Back on the balcony, the hatchling stretched lightly, testing its wings beneath the disguise of fur. It wanted to soar even just a little, but it held back. The city below was loud, unpredictable, and full of danger. And yet, it was not the city that concerned the hatchling, it was the Watchers. It felt their eyes, their curiosity, and knew they would soon move closer. The human did not notice this tension, but the hatchling felt it deep in its bones. Ethan, unaware of the cosmic attention he had drawn, set his cup aside. "You must be tired of me talking to you," he said with a small smile. The hatchling blinked slowly in response. It could not speak, not in human language, but it could communicate in ways that mattered. Through tiny gestures, through silence, through presence, it told Ethan, "I trust you." And in return, Ethan simply nodded, understanding more than words could say. The night grew colder and the hatchling curled beside the food bowl. Far above, alien ships adjusted their positions, careful not to disturb the atmosphere. They had never seen a human act this way, with no strategy, no ambition, no plan to gain power or influence. The hatchling's survival, aided by simple kindness, was reshaping the way distant civilizations viewed humanity. Humans were fragile, yes, but capable of protecting life in a way that strength alone could not match. In its dreams that night, the hatchling imagined the stars. It imagined wings that could stretch across planets and oceans, a mother who might still be searching, and now, the quiet warmth of a human companion. The images mixed together, home, danger, safety, curiosity, and formed something new, hope. It realized that survival did not always mean fighting or fleeing. Sometimes survival meant trust, and sometimes trust could be stronger than fear. Ethan went inside briefly, leaving the balcony door slightly open. The hatchling stretched again, letting its small wings quiver beneath the fur. It wanted to test them more, to feel the wind lift its body, but tonight, it stayed close to the human's food. It was safer here, in the presence of care, than anywhere else in the city. Far above, the alien observers whispered to one another in signals humans could not understand. "Why does it survive?" one asked. "It is small." "Wait. Why does the human not destroy it?" The other replied, uncertain, "It is the human. Its actions are different. There is a bond we do not yet comprehend." The Dragon Queen, sensing the distant discussion, allowed herself a rare moment of calm. She had not seen this kind of guardianship in her long life. Her hatchling was small, vulnerable, and unprotected, yet it lived because of a human's simple choice: to feed, to care, and to continue, day after day, without expectation. That choice, trivial as it seemed, carried a power the galaxy was only beginning to understand. As the night deepened, the city slept beneath a blanket of stars. Ethan returned to the balcony, checking the food once more. "Sleep well," he whispered. The hatchling blinked slowly, its eyes reflecting the distant lights, not just of the city but of ships hovering unseen above. It did not fully understand humans, but it understood him. And that was enough. Above the city, watchers adjusted their positions, intrigued, cautious, and slightly in awe. They had seen powerful armies, destructive weapons, and fierce creatures, yet they had never observed something like this: a human quietly protecting a being far stronger than himself. The simplicity of it, the lack of ambition, the lack of fear, was what made it remarkable. The hatchling closed its eyes, curling into the soft shadow near the railing. It had survived the storm of space, the loss of family, and the harshness of the galaxy. And now, under the quiet gaze of a human, under the watchful attention of the stars, it felt something it had not felt in months: safety. Tomorrow would bring another meal, another quiet moment, and perhaps another ripple of attention from above. The galaxy was vast, full of dangers and wonders alike, but for tonight, the small balcony was a sanctuary. Here, life mattered not because of power or fire, but because someone cared. And in that care, even a tiny hatchling could survive, and maybe, just maybe, change the way the universe looked at humans forever. The night was still, but the city felt different. Lights flickered in the distance, and a soft breeze carried the smell of rain yet to come. Ethan stepped onto his balcony, carrying the usual bowl of food. He paused when he saw the cat waiting, but something was unusual tonight. The air felt heavier, almost electric, and the little creature's eyes glowed faintly in the soft light. The hatchling had grown strong enough to control small changes in its form. It had been hiding for months, careful not to reveal its true self. But tonight it was ready. The danger lurking in the skies had grown too close, and it could no longer remain a simple cat. Slowly, it shifted, shrinking and stretching, letting scales shimmer beneath the faux fur, letting tiny wings tremble free from concealment. Ethan froze. The bowl of food slipped slightly from his hands. His eyes widened as the small cat stretched and changed, revealing the delicate shape of a dragon hatchling. Its eyes shone gold, reflecting the city lights and the stars above. It was no larger than a small dog, but it radiated power, intelligence, and life far beyond anything Ethan had imagined. The hatchling stepped closer, claws soft on the balcony floor. Ethan, despite the shock, did not scream or run. He simply took a cautious step back and watched. His heart pounded, but fear did not overwhelm him. He only felt awe, wonder, and an unspoken connection. You're not a cat," he whispered, voice trembling slightly. The hatchling blinked slowly and tilted its head. It could not speak human words, but in the quiet way dragons communicated, it told Ethan, "I am alive. I trust you. I am safe because of you." Just as Ethan was trying to comprehend the sight, the sky above the city rippled with light. Alien ships, sleek and dark, moved silently, their presence making the stars shimmer unnaturally. People in the streets below began to notice, pointing and whispering, but no one could understand what they saw. The hatchling stiffened, its small body radiating a faint heat as it sensed the danger. And then a larger presence appeared, a ship that did not belong to the aliens but to the stars themselves. Its surface gleamed like polished gold and energy rippled across its hull. The Dragon Queen had arrived. From her ship, she looked down at the city and saw her child in its true form, standing beside a human who had no idea of the power he had helped protect. Ethan's mouth opened in shock, but the hatchling nudged him gently, calming him. It wanted him to remain still, to watch, to understand. Fear was not required here. The human had done nothing wrong. He had only offered care. And that care had created a bond stronger than magic, stronger than fear. The Dragon Queen descended, her form immense even within the confines of her ship. Her eyes, like molten gold, studied the human. She expected panic, violence, resistance, but she saw none. Ethan simply stood on his balcony, arms slightly raised in surprise, but his gaze steady. He did not bow, did not plead, did not try to run. He only looked at her and then at the hatchling, his voice soft. I didn't know," he said. "I just fed it. It was hungry." The Dragon Queen's eyes narrowed, not with anger but with curiosity. She had ruled countless systems, defeated enemies, and demanded obedience across the stars. She had never encountered a being who acted with such purity of intent. "You fed my hatchling," she said, her voice like thunder and silk combined. "Without knowing what it was. Without asking for reward. Why?" Ethan swallowed, unsure how to answer. I don't know," he said honestly. "It was hungry. I wanted to help. That's all." The Queen's golden gaze softened slightly. Her child, once fragile and hidden, looked up at her now with trust and joy. The bond they shared with this human was undeniable. The Queen felt something she had not felt in centuries, respect. Not forced respect. Not fear-driven obedience. Real respect, earned through simple, quiet action. Below, people on the streets whispered and pointed, sensing the enormity of what they could not see. The hatchling flapped its tiny wings, stretching them fully for the first time since arriving on Earth. The golden glow of its eyes reflected hope, trust, and the promise of survival. Ethan stepped closer, placing a hand near the dragon, careful but without fear. The hatchling leaned into him, a gesture of thanks and recognition. The Queen lowered herself closer, careful not to disturb the human, and spoke again. "Humans are fragile, but you have done what few dragons could have expected. You protected life without power, without fear, without expectation. This is extraordinary." Ethan blinked, still overwhelmed. "I didn't do anything special," he said quietly. "I just fed it every day." The Queen's eyes softened. "That is everything," she said. She extended a claw gently toward her hatchling, who leaped gracefully into her arms. For the first time in months, the hatchling felt the warmth of home, the presence of its mother, yet it did not hesitate to glance at the human one last time. It had survived, thrived, and formed a bond that transcended worlds. Ethan watched, heart racing, as the Queen rose into the sky with her hatchling. The golden ship glimmered against the city lights, leaving a trail of sparkling energy in its wake. People below screamed, cheered, and stared, but Ethan's attention was on what had happened above his balcony. He had unknowingly saved a life that mattered across galaxies. A life that had changed the way one of the oldest beings in the universe saw humanity. For a moment, the balcony was quiet again. The city hummed its normal tune, unaware of the cosmic events that had just unfolded. Ethan placed the empty food bowl aside and sat down, finally breathing deeply. He thought of the hatchling, of the Queen, and of the strange ripple of events that had begun with something as simple as kindness. Somewhere in the stars, the Dragon Queen observed, reflecting on the species that had nurtured her child without knowing its true importance. Humanity, she realized, was capable of actions far greater than strength or magic alone. Quiet care, patience, and trust could ripple across the universe, touching lives and hearts in ways even dragons could not achieve. Ethan leaned back, eyes on the fading stars, and whispered, "I guess I did something right." The thought was simple, yet it carried a weight he could not fully understand. He had no idea that the galaxy itself was watching, that dragons would remember his actions, or that the universe might treat humans differently because of him. The night ended quietly, but the impact of that moment stretched across worlds. A small dragon hatchling had returned home, a queen had learned something new about humanity, and a human had discovered that simple acts of care could change more than one life. They could change the galaxy. And on the balcony, empty now, the echoes of small paws, quiet trust, and golden eyes lingered, leaving Ethan with a sense of wonder he would never forget. The city had returned to its usual rhythm, but Ethan's world felt different. From his balcony, he looked at the streets below, at the distant hum of cars, the flickering lights in neighboring buildings, and the quiet sky above. He had no idea that the universe had just shifted because of him, that dragons and alien watchers alike had noted his actions, and that the small, quiet choices he had made were now remembered across the stars. It had been a week since the Dragon Queen had taken her hatchling back into the skies. Ethan still found it hard to believe what he had seen. The small creature he had fed nightly, the cat that had perched so quietly, was actually a dragon hatchling, the last of its clutch. He had not saved it for glory, for fame, or even for reward. He had fed it because he could, because it needed help, and because, in his small human way, he believed in kindness. Meanwhile, in the distant reaches of the galaxy, the Dragon Queen reflected on what she had witnessed. Her hatchling had survived, not because of dragon strength, but because of a human's simple care. She realized that humans were fragile, yes, but capable of something dragons often overlooked: patience, trust, and quiet consistency. They did not need fear to inspire loyalty, nor power to demand respect. The bond Ethan had formed with her hatchling was proof of that. The Queen shared the story with her advisors and other dragons across the systems. In dragon councils, the tale was recounted over and over. They spoke of a human who had protected a dragon child without knowledge, without expectation, and without magic. Other dragons listened with disbelief, some skeptical, some thoughtful. But the truth remained clear: humans, despite their weakness, had something dragons often lacked. They cared in ways that could not be measured with fire, wings, or strength. Ethan continued his routine on the balcony, though now he did so with a quiet pride he did not fully understand. The city seemed smaller and yet larger at the same time. He felt connected not just to the little creature he had fed, but to something greater, something infinite. The universe had noticed him even if he did not know it. And that thought, though vague, gave him a deep, quiet joy. The hatchling, now safe with its mother, sometimes thought of Ethan. In the nights when it rested beneath the Dragon Queen's golden wings, it would remember the human who had fed it without fear. That memory made it stronger, braver, and more curious. Dragons were ancient, but they could recognize value when they saw it. And the hatchling had learned that humans were capable of extraordinary acts of care, even when they seemed small and fragile. Across the city, rumors began to spread. People noticed strange lights in the sky, whispers of dragons, and unusual energy readings that defied explanation. Scientists argued, dreamers speculated, and ordinary humans simply stared at the stars, wondering. But none could know the truth: that one human living quietly in a tall building had altered the perception of an entire species. One evening, Ethan sat on his balcony, sipping tea and looking at the sky. He thought of the cat that had come to him night after night. He remembered its strange, golden eyes, its quiet trust, and the warmth he had felt simply by helping it survive. He had not known he was feeding a dragon. He had not known that his actions could ripple across galaxies. And yet, now, he understood that something as small as kindness could change worlds. Far away, the Dragon Queen instructed her scouts to remember humans differently. They were no longer just fragile creatures, weak and unpredictable. They were capable of care that could rival even the oldest magic. Across dragon networks and star systems, the story spread: humans were not only to be observed but to be respected. Their strength was subtle, invisible to many, but undeniable when noticed. The hatchling, now strong and growing quickly, sometimes let its thoughts drift to earth. It remembered the tiny balcony, the simple food bowl, and the gentle, patient human who had protected it when no one else could. The memory shaped its understanding of life. Dragons often relied on fire, power, and fear. But this hatchling had learned that true strength could also come from gentleness and trust. It carried that lesson into every adventure, every flight, and every encounter. Ethan's days returned to normal. He went to work, spoke to neighbors occasionally, and carried on in his quiet human life. Yet the universe was forever altered by his small actions. Somewhere beyond the stars, dragons remembered him. The queen herself would not forget the human who had fed her hatchling. It was a story she would tell for generations, a reminder that humans could be guardians, protectors, and friends in ways that even dragons could not always predict. One night, as Ethan looked up at the sky, he saw a faint shimmer, a light that seemed to pulse gently, almost like a heartbeat. He did not understand it, but he smiled. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was a star reflecting the city lights. Yet, deep down he felt a connection to something larger, something ancient and alive. He felt that he had made a difference, even unknowingly, and that the universe had noticed. And in that quiet human moment, the galaxy remembered. It remembered a species that could protect without fear, care without expectation, and change the course of life simply by being consistent, patient, and kind. Dragons, scouts, and watchers alike recorded the story. They remembered a human who fed a cat every night, unaware that it was the last of a dragon hatchling. And in that memory, humanity earned a place in the stars, not for war, not for conquest, but for care. The hatchling would grow, the dragon queen would continue her reign, and the galaxy would remain vast and full of dangers. Yet the story of one small human and one dragon child would endure. It was a story of trust, patience, and the quiet power of kindness. A reminder that even the smallest actions could ripple across the universe and change the way ancient beings saw humanity forever. Ethan set down his empty cup, leaning against the balcony railing. The city hummed below, ordinary and alive, unaware of what had passed. And yet, for Ethan, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. He had fed a life, unknowingly saved it, and in doing so, had left a mark that stretched across galaxies. In that quiet truth he found contentment. And somewhere in the stars, dragons still remembered.